Hi. If you enjoy stories that keep you on edge and make you feel every moment with the characters, subscribe and hit like. There's so much more to come. My name is Alina, and what I'm about to tell you changed how I view family and trust. My mom remarried and a stepfather came into our lives. Outwardly, he seemed ordinary. Tall, neat haircut, calm voice. But I immediately sensed something unusual in him. I was a teenager in high school. My life seemed simple: school, friends, books. Yet with his presence, every day carried a subtle tension. I tried to be polite, to listen carefully, but I couldn't ignore how his gaze lingered on me when I least expected it. His presence sometimes made the air feel heavy, as if all emotions were visible. Life with my stepfather gradually became strangely familiar. At first, it was little things. He would always put a cup of tea on my desk if he saw I was staying late with homework. He remembered which books I liked and sometimes brought new ones from his office shelf. But I began to notice that his care wasn't ordinary. It was deeper, more attentive, sometimes almost painfully insistent. Sometimes we were left alone at home. Mom stayed late at work or went to the store, and those evenings became a real test for me. At first, we just talked about trivial things: the weather, school, movies we planned to watch. But gradually, conversations went deeper. He spoke about his childhood, how hard it was for him to get used to new people and new living conditions. His voice was soft, his eyes looked straight into mine, and I felt a strange warmth mixed with tension. My heart would beat faster when he said something about me that seemed unnecessary, like noticing I was tired or that I needed more rest. I tried to distract myself, looking at a book or my phone, but my thoughts kept returning to him. One evening, a moment occurred I would never forget. The lights suddenly went out, and we were left sitting in total darkness. He carefully approached with a flashlight, sat beside me, and we began discussing old photos of my mom. His hands trembled slightly as he held the pictures, and his voice became quiet, almost intimate. I sat next to him, feeling a strange mix of safety and anxiety. We laughed, recalling stories, and at one point I noticed him briefly touch my hand. It seemed casual, but I felt a jolt run through me. My mind tried to explain it as coincidence, but my heart said otherwise. Since then, every evening when Mom went out or stayed late, I felt this tension between us, quiet, invisible, yet tangible with every inch of skin. I realized I couldn't share these feelings with anyone. It was our little secret, something we both tried to ignore, yet it existed. I often remembered the first time I noticed his gaze on me, when he came into the kitchen while I was making tea. He stood in the doorway, smiling, and I felt as if the whole world had shrunk to that single moment. As the days went by, our evenings alone together became increasingly familiar, and with familiarity came tension. We were no longer just sitting side by side talking about trivial things. I began noticing his gestures, how he leaned closer when explaining something, how he casually touched my hand when handing me a book or a cup. These touches were innocent, yet they sparked a strange warmth inside that couldn't be ignored. I tried to distract myself with my thoughts, my phone, or a book, but my attention always returned to him. Sometimes we laughed at something silly, but that laughter carried a particular softness I only felt with him. One evening, Mom stayed out later than usual, and we were alone at home. The room was quiet. Only the sound of our steps and the soft ticking of the clock created a special atmosphere. He suggested making tea, and we walked to the kitchen together. His movements were calm, confident, and at that moment I realized how closely I was watching every motion he made. When he handed me the cup of tea, our fingers brushed for a moment, and the touch made me shiver. I lifted my eyes and saw him looking at me as if he wanted to say something, but the words got stuck somewhere between us. We sat at the table, and he began to talk about his youth, the difficult moments, how he had to learn to trust people again. I listened, feeling my heart beating faster than usual, a tension growing inside that I couldn't hide. At one point he quietly said, "Alina, I'm glad we can be who we are and speak openly." His gaze was such that I understood he felt the same way I did. I didn't know how to react, but deep down, the feeling was both unsettling and comforting. We sat there for a long time, just together, sometimes laughing, sometimes silent, and I realized these evenings would remain in memory forever as moments when our world stopped being ordinary. These evenings alone together had become something special, almost a ritual. Sometimes we just sat next to each other on the couch, not saying a word, and it felt as if everything else disappeared. Only we remained in the quiet tension hanging between us. I began noticing details I hadn't seen before. How he unconsciously brushed his hair back when he laughed, how his voice slightly changed when speaking to me privately, without Mom around. One day he suggested watching a movie. We settled on the couch, and at first it was simple, laughing at scenes, commenting on characters. But with each hour I felt something shifting between us. His hand briefly touched mine as he handed me popcorn, and I felt my heart leap. We watched a few more scenes, and I noticed he tried to sit closer, though subtly, almost imperceptibly. At one point the lights went out, an unexpected outage. I felt his hand tense slightly near mine, and his breath became audible. He laughed quietly, saying it added a real horror movie vibe, and I smiled involuntarily, but inside, a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation burned. We sat in the darkness, only the TV screen faintly lighting our faces, and I realized for the first time that his gaze on me was different from usual, softer, more attentive, with a hidden care I hadn't seen before. I tried not to reveal my emotions, but my heart literally leapt in my chest. When the lights came back, he tensed slightly, as if he felt the tension between us two. We continued watching the movie, silently now, each lost in our thoughts. Deep down I understood that this feeling had no name, but it was growing with every minute, every glance, every accidental touch. He told stories from his past, and I listened, increasingly aware that these evenings were more than just time spent together. I didn't know how to interpret my feelings, but one thing was clear. Our world would never be the same, and every moment with him was filled with a quiet, barely perceptible tension, keeping me in constant anticipation of the next one. Weeks passed, and our life with my stepfather entered a new phase. We were alone at home more often, discussing books, movies, music, even cooking dinner together. It seemed like ordinary daily routine, yet every moment was filled with hidden tension and attention to each other. And then something unexpected happened. Mom announced that she was going to a conference in another city for several days, leaving us alone in the house. The news simultaneously excited and unsettled me. I realized that everything that would happen during these days would remain just between us, and that was a little frightening. The first morning without Mom began as usual. We had breakfast together, joked, discussed plans for the day. But then something strange occurred. A stranger appeared in the yard. A middle-aged man who approached our door and introduced himself as Mom's colleague. He said that Mom asked him to pick up some important documents and deliver them personally. Something about his gaze seemed unusual to me. I felt a wave of anxiety I couldn't explain. My stepfather remained calm but carefully observed the stranger's every movement. I noticed his shoulders tense slightly, his expression becoming focused and alert. The man tried to enter the house, but my stepfather, gently yet firmly, said that until Mom returned, he couldn't allow it. The stranger frowned, pretending to be friendly, but I sensed a hidden threat. We walked him to the gate together, and only when he left did my stepfather turn to me and quietly say, "Alina, never underestimate your intuition. I will always be here to protect you." I felt a mixture of relief and unease, realizing that the trust one had for him had deepened. That evening we sat in the living room discussing what had happened. I realized that the world around us had changed, that our life now held its own secrets and moments of danger, and for the first time, I felt that my stepfather and I were a team. We laughed and joked, yet beneath the surface the tension remained. I understood that these days would be a test for both of us, that we would learn to trust each other not only in everyday matters but also in complex, unforeseen situations. And I felt that this was no longer just a stepfather-daughter relationship. It was something deeper, something that connected us and made us see the world and each other in a new light. The days without Mom dragged slowly, but every moment with my stepfather became especially significant. We talked more, shared thoughts and feelings that no one else had ever heard. It felt as though we had opened up to each other in a way we never had with anyone else. One evening, while preparing dinner, he suggested putting on some music. I turned on a soft melody, and we began cooking slowly. His movements were smooth and confident, and I noticed how he would occasionally encourage me, suggesting how to chop vegetables or when to turn the meat. I found myself enjoying every second, every glance, every word. At one point, he suddenly stopped, looked at me, and said, "Alina, sometimes life puts us in situations where we have to make decisions faster than we are ready for." I felt he was hinting at something important, and my heart skipped a beat. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. It was the stranger with the documents again. But now his gaze was insistent and wary, as if checking who was inside. My stepfather immediately reacted, approached the door, and calmly but firmly said, "You will receive the documents only from your mother. Right now, we are alone and won't let anyone in." The man frowned, took a step back, seemingly realizing he could not cross this boundary. After he left, we sat on the couch and my stepfather quietly said, "See how important it is to trust yourself and be ready to act? I want you to know, I am always here, and I will never let anyone threaten you." I felt an unusual calm and warmth. These events showed me that our relationship was more than ordinary care. We were a team, and this sense of trust was so strong that I felt for the first time that I could rely on him completely. Later that evening, when we were alone in the quiet living room, he told me about his past, how he learned to protect and care for the people he loves. His words were quiet but filled with strength and conviction. I listened, feeling the world around us slow down, each word and glance becoming part of something important. I realized that these few days without Mom had changed both of us, revealing new layers of our relationship and allowing me to feel that there was a special bond between us, trust and understanding that required no words. And I understood that these events would leave a lasting mark on my life, bringing us closer and stronger than ever before. The last day without Mom had arrived, and there was a subtle tension in the air, as if the very atmosphere whispered that these days had changed us forever. My stepfather and I sat at breakfast, joking and discussing plans for the day, but I realized that a new feeling had settled inside me, a sense of trust, respect, and deep connection that words could not capture. He looked at me and quietly said, "Alina, these past few days have shown that we can rely on each other. This is important not only for us but for the whole family." I nodded, feeling that my emotions aligned with his words. Everything that had happened during this time, the unexpected visits, moments of tension, late-night conversations, had become part of our shared story. When Mom returned in the evening, the house was filled with familiar comfort, yet I knew that the bond between my stepfather and me had changed. We were no longer just stepfather and daughter. We had become a team, people who could trust, support, and protect each other in any situation. I looked at him and smiled, realizing that these days alone with him had left an indelible mark on my heart. For the first time, I understood that a real family is not only a biological connection, but trust, understanding, and the ability to be there for each other in the hardest moments. Those few days had been a test we faced together, and I knew, now we were stronger, closer, and ready to face the future together.